What's up, YouTubers and plant lovers? It's Justin, and today I was going to show you how to do some general maintenance on one of my bonsai trees. Now, the plant I have in front of me is known as the Schefflera arboricola. The common name is known as the dwarf umbrella tree. It's also known as the dwarf Hawaiian Schefflera, the Australian ivy palm, the umbrella bush, the octopus tree, the parasol plant, and then you should know that there is a umbrella tree and then a dwarf variety of the umbrella tree as well. Now, the dwarf umbrella tree doesn't get very tall at all. I think at most it maybe tops out around 14 to 15 feet high. And then the regular umbrella tree gets much taller. You can also tell the difference by the leaves. The leaves for the dwarf umbrella tree only get to be about 4, maybe 6 inches long. And then the regular umbrella tree gets considerably longer leaves on it also. Now, I'm not going to go into too much on how to care for this plant. I did in a previous video on the dwarf umbrella tree. So if you want to know any information on that plant or this one, just check out that video that I'll put in the link up here. Now, mainly all I'm going to do, just because winter is just about over, all the snow is melted from that last Arctic blast that the whole country just received. It's all gone, and spring is right around the corner. According to Punxsutawney, we may have another 5 weeks of winter, but the weather's been really nice, so I wanted to go ahead and bust out a couple of my more indoor bonsai trees and do some general all kind of maintenance and general hygiene for these guys, just to get them ready for the up and coming spring and summer months, to get them a really good head start. Now, I will talk a little bit about care, but like I said, I'm not going to go too much into that. With this guy, he loves a decent amount of sunlight. He is an established plant. So established plants can take a little bit of direct sunlight, especially if they're used to getting that kind of from the get-go. But if you're not sure if yours is used to direct sunlight, err on the side of caution and kind of put him in bright, indirect light and introduce him to direct sunlight slowly, because you can scorch and burn the leaves, and if left unchecked long enough, you could potentially kill your plant. But I keep mine basically underneath the LEDs, and he's very happy right there. It gives him the right amount of light for the right duration and the right length of time, and you can really kind of tell that they've kind of added on a little bit of mass. I understand that this is a really big boy, but he's done really well with the kind of light situation that I've given him. So if you find that yours isn't getting the right amount of light, introduce some artificial grow lights for them. They really do like that. They kind of like a bright light, but not for very long and not too direct. So the artificial grow lights will really help this plant out tremendously. When it comes to water, you really kind of want to err on the side of caution. They are a little bit more tolerant of drier soils than they are from overwatering. So if you're not entirely sure if you should go ahead and water your plant, always take your finger and stick it down in the soil about an inch or two, maybe just up to the first knuckle. And if you feel any moisture at all, do not water him. Overwatering can kill this plant. Like I said, they prefer to be a little bit underwater than they do overwater. Humidity is very important with these guys as well. Now, with in a bonsai form for these umbrella trees, they're not really known for the ramification. They're not very strong on branch development, just because of the way of the tree and the leaves. But if you do want to see them kind of develop more of the aerial roots that this bonsai form is really known for, introduce a good amount of humidity. I know that really does help with the aerial roots. And in the bottom parts of the branches towards the center of the plant, I am starting to see a little bit more of an aerial root development. And I've noticed that when I first had him, I didn't really check the humidity too well. But I find that if I keep them around 50 to 60%, that really does help them out. So high humidity is very important with these guys if you can afford it. Now, I have mine sitting rather close to the humidifier, but smaller plants you can sit on a pebble tray, or you can walk around every other day and kind of mist it a little bit. But I find with the amount of humidity for the size of this guy, a humidifier really works well for him. Soil can be kind of tricky with them just because they typically do get a lot of humidity and a decent amount of water during the growing season. I find that something that's organically rich in some compost but drains really quickly is something that's kind of ideal for him. So a lot of sphagnum moss and a little bit of sand mixed in with it can kind of help him out as well. And always make sure that your pot does have drainage holes in the bottom to let that excess water escape. If you don't have drainage holes in your pot, you should put them in there yourself because your plant will succumb to root rot fairly quickly. Along with the soil, you want to keep the soil slightly acidic. Anywhere from around 6.0 up to 6.5, even up to neutral around 7 is okay. But they do prefer it to be slightly acidic on that end as well. And you know, for me, I always mix in some coco coir to kind of help with the acidity for my potted plants. So if you're not entirely sure if you do have any pests, but you can't tell, always put your plant in the bathtub or take it outside and spray it down with the garden hose. Plants love showers. I've noticed that a lot with this guy too, just based on its sheer size and the amount of leaves and foliage that this guy has. I can't go and lift it up and look underneath every single leaf to make sure I don't see anything in there. So the easiest thing to do to combat any kind of pest with a plant of this size or any kind of foliage of this means would be to just go ahead and stick it in the bathtub and use a detachable shower head and put it on full blast and just kind of spray the entire thing down. Now, every once in a while, I will have to enlist the help of my partner to help me kind of turn it over and make sure I'm kind of spraying underneath and getting the other sides of the leaves too. As we know, a majority of the pests that hang out on these plants always like to hang out on the underside of any leaf. So don't just spray it from the top, but get underneath as well and kind of blast up through the leaves also. This is how Mother Nature combats pests in nature. Rainfall comes down and knocks a majority of the pests off and washes them away. And you kind of want to best recreate that in the shower or outdoors with the garden hose too. Now, after talking about all that, I want to go ahead and get into some general maintenance and some kind of pruning and general hygiene for this guy. Like I said, the winter time is over and we're getting ready to head into spring, and I want to make sure that this plant is happy and healthy and ready for the new growing season. With all that being said, you basically want to first look your plant over. You may have to kind of scoot back a little bit and just take in the shape of the plant. You may have to spin him around a little bit just to kind of figure out what side you want to be the front of the tree and what side you would like to be the back of the tree. The way I originally had it, I want to be the front of the tree. I had to break off 2 branches in the back. One was hanging on by a little thread, and the other had a nice little cut in him that I know wouldn't have been too well for his health. So I went ahead and removed that, but there is a rather large kind of opening in the back that shouldn't be too much of a problem just because it's on the back side of the plant. Now, I have all my tools over here to the side, including my pruning shears, my shear sharpener, another set of shears. They sell it basically to kind of blow dust or dirt off of the pot. What I use to actually help me get down into the soil and kind of loosen it up and aerate it a little bit. I've got a set of tweezers and a little bitty soil scoop so that I can add any more kind of soil or fertilizer down into the pot without actually having to mess it all up. Now, as always, I always say you should always sanitize or clean any of the tools that you have been working with in the past on other plants just to keep them clean and sanitized and give your plant a happy and healthy start because if you use shears on one plant and cut it on another, you can transmit disease. Alright, so now that I've pretty much taken in the size and shape of the plant and I know what I want to be the front and what I want to be the back, I'm going to decide what kind of style I want my bonsai tree to take. Now, as I said earlier, the Scheffeleras, the mini dwarfs, aren't really known for their ramification. They're not really known for branch development, so that is something you will have to take into consideration whenever styling your bonsai tree. These guys are basically known for the aerial roots and the kind of smoother bark. I don't think it's really even considered bark. It just kind of turns brown, and it's pretty flimsy. So you have to be very careful because it can snap easily, but it doesn't get its typical hard or rough bark that you may notice on trees in the Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, and Tennessee areas around here. The kind of rough textured bark that you would see on trees. This is just kind of a darker brown and pretty smooth, but it will get a bunch of aerial roots that will add a bunch of character to the plant. So that being said, I'm going to look over all these branches to decide what kind of shape and style I want to give the tree. Now, I've done a little bit of research, so I know the kind of style that I want to give this tree is kind of the formal, upright, general style, for lack of a better word. And basically the difference between formal and informal upright is the kind of trunk or stem of the tree. Formal would be pretty much straight up and down, kind of a tapered trunk that you would see on just about any tree in nature. Informal will still have that taper, but it won't necessarily be straight. It may kind of have like a little S or a bend in there. But with this guy, I want to give him more of the formal approach for that style. So I'm going to continue to look it over, and with my sanitized, sharpened pruning shears, I am going to remove any kind of branches that I don't think will fit in with this type of style that I want this guy to take. Now, I'm basically looking for any dead or dying branches with any kind of dead or dying leaves on here, and I'm going to remove those. I'm also looking for any kind of sickly or discolored branches that may not appease me aesthetically. And then I'm also looking for any branches that don't have a natural kind of look to them. Branches that may be kind of crossing, or branches that may have a unnatural shape or bend to it. Branches that may hide the center of the trunk, or branches that kind of point down and may kind of develop more towards the bottom of the plant. Because in bonsai, you really do want to see the trunk of the tree. So anything that may inhibit people from seeing the trunk, you do kind of want to remove, especially for this guy because of the aerial roots that they are known for. And as always, I have my little bucket below me to catch any of this debris, because at the bottom of the pot, from it being a relatively dry winter, I had the humidifier going, but you can tell some of the leaves did die, turn brown, and kind of fall off. And you want to keep a really good, healthy hygiene for this plant, and a lot of dead leaves on the bottom of the pot, or on the top of the pot rather, are not good, because there are certain pests or bugs that like to live underneath all this dead and decaying rot in the pot. So always get into a habit of being rather healthy and clean with your plants, not just the bonsai trees. And just so you know, this plant is toxic. It is rather toxic, so you should be wearing gloves, or you should definitely wash your hands after handling the plant and doing some pruning. So make sure that you're not just throwing any of these leaves on the ground and plans to actually come back and pick them up later. Instead, just throw them in the bucket and then throw that outside in the waste bin. Alright, so I've cleaned most of the back out, trying to remove any kind of dead leaves that I can. And while I'm removing leaves and stems, I'm also looking for any kind of weeds that may be coming up through here as well. Last summer, I had him out back, kind of underneath the awning, to help him with the sun. And because of that, they'll end up getting a whole bunch of weeds that settle down in the soil and come out the following year. Now, typically, it's not that big a deal, but as we know, weeds will compete with your plant for nutrients and water, and then also you'll want to remove any kind of suckers that are coming up from the soil as a new tree, or any suckers that you see on any branches. Alright, now we've done a complete 360, got him back to the original position, and I've cleaned out a bunch of this dead and dying leaves and debris that built up over the fall and winter time. Now, truthfully, I should have been doing this all winter, but like I said, I was hosing them off and putting them in the bath just to give them a nice little shower and keep them clean. So that did knock off a little bit of debris, but you won't be able to get all of it unless you sit down and kind of go over with it. All right. Now, once you finish combing through the soil and the top parts of the root mass, you'll want to go in with the stems and, like I said, remove any dead or dying leaves that are on anything that looks unsightly. If you see any kind of pest or any filaments, or again branches that end up crossing, inevitably will start rubbing each other and create an irritation or an opening for pests or disease or anything of that nature to enter your healthy plant. Any kind of branches that look dead, or any kind of branches that just don't add to the overall shape and style of the tree that you're wanting to do. There are about 2 different types of pruning that you can do for a bonsai tree. You have your general structural pruning, which should only be done in the spring, just because that's kind of more of a heavy or progressive pruning. And then you have your general maintenance kind of pruning that will keep your tree clean and healthy. That can be done pretty much any time of year, especially if you're using an indoor kind of bonsai tree. Now, I call this an indoor bonsai tree, but it's really not. In the spring and summer, if the temperatures are okay, you should have this guy outside. Now, as I say, always keep the shape and size of the plant, or structure rather, of the plant in mind. And remember, if you cut something off that you didn't mean to, or remove a branch that might be integral to the structure of the tree, don't worry. It's just like hair. It will grow back. It may take a while for the branch to develop fully again, but this is a learning process, so don't get mad over an accident. But just always keep that in mind as you're starting to remove stems, branches, and leaves. It looks like I'm doing a really kind of lot of pruning here, which I am, but I didn't prune him last spring. So this spring I'm going to have to be a little aggressive. Branches at the bottom, you don't want to have a whole bunch of branch development around there. You want to actually keep the sheer size and mass of the structure of the plant, and remove any kind of branches that may bump into that or hide them.
5 minutes later.
I know what you'll say. I did go a little bit over the top, and that's fine. But I wanted to go ahead and clear out a whole bunch of the way for the general shape and structure of the tree. So now that I've done all that, I can let the tree kind of rest and regroup and grow and develop over the course of the incoming spring and summer. And then next spring, I will probably go ahead and repot him. You don't really have to wire these guys or kind of string them up really to get them to form any kind of natural look that you want. That really doesn't benefit the dwarf umbrella tree. Instead, you can kind of let them kind of grow, kind of free range, and then kind of step in and prune back anything that may not fit. I'm not 100% sure, but it does look like I've got some spots under an occasional leaf or two. So I'm worried it may be scale. And in that case, I may have to do a little bit more trimming. That's why I'm trying to look up and under the leaves where the scale will mainly attach itself, and then kind of prune aggressively to make sure that I don't see anything else that may be left on any kind of petiole or branch or stem or leaf for that matter. Now thankfully I've hopefully caught this a little bit early, because I don't see too much. If it was rather infested, then I would see a bunch more on the stems and petioles. Mainly I just see them on the undersides of leaves. And where I see one, I just go ahead and try to detach the entire stem if necessary. And as I said earlier, scale is one of the harder pests to get rid of. So your best bet to combat scale is to take preventative measures and remove anything that looks like it may have scale on it. And if you don't have too much, you can actually take a sharp blade on a pair of scissors or shears or knives and kind of scratch them off, or just kind of remove them by cutting the branch off. Now, as I said, this all will grow back with time, and this is kind of a younger plant. It's not too young, but I don't think I'm going to be out too much progress with this guy. So I'd rather be a little aggressive now, and then in the up and coming months just kind of pay a little bit more attention to him to see how he's developing. Like I said, I see a bunch of new leaf growth on here, so that tells me he's not too bad off right now. But as I was removing a bunch to try and get his general structure going, and then I've noticed a little bit of what could be scale, it's just translated into heavy pruning. But as we know, pruning is integral to keeping a bonsai tree. You need to prune above the soil and below the soil as well. And with these trees, they do develop rather thick roots, so I would go at least every other year and repot this guy. And because of all this rigorous pruning, I will go ahead and kind of dig some holes into the soil a little bit around the roots carefully, and then try and sprinkle in a little bit more soil and compost and possibly some perlite to help out with the roots and the feeding and all this trauma that he's just had to endure. So just very carefully, I'm just taking this and kind of digging very cautiously into the soil just to kind of aerate it a little bit and put a little bit of holes down in there. And then I will sprinkle in a little bit more soil and compost down in there. And with older trees and more established trees, I like to feed with the pellet fertilizers that break down slowly over time. So I won't put too much compost down in here, but I will add a little bit just to try and help him recover nicely. And as I'm doing this, I'm slowly just kind of pressing down, and if you meet any resistance at all, don't go any further, because that's a root. Could be a rock, but it's probably a root. You don't want to puncture a whole bunch of root mass and cause damage to the roots. Alright, now, as I was saying earlier, the best way to kind of combat any kind of infestation is to take preventative measures. Basically, you want to look your plant over at least once a week, if not every other week, just to kind of take your plant out and make sure it's not stuck in the back where you can't see it. I had him kind of on the floor with some LEDs draped over top underneath the window so he would get a little bit of natural sunlight. Unfortunately, I had some other plants in his way, so it wasn't the easiest for me to actually get to him and look him over. But let me tell you, lesson learned, because this is a big boy, and with an infestation like I may be looking at, it's going to cost me a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of resources to actually try and get him back to where I want him to look. Now, as I said, bonsai is not a race. It is more of a journey, and it will take time and resources and compassion. So be very kind of mindful of what you're looking over. And as I said, to best kind of prevent a lot of this stuff, take your plant and set it in the shower and just kind of spray them off at least every other week. Well, in the wintertime, you may want to do about every other month. But during the growing season, you want to do it at least every other week, maybe even once a month, just to kind of put your plant in there and kind of spraying off, especially the larger ones too, to make sure that you don't have anything that may be settling in without you noticing it. Now, the only other thing I have left to do would be more of a longevity kind of goal, just to kind of make sure that I get him out more often and look him over, because if this is scale, then one kind of go around won't be enough to catch them all and make sure that I don't kill the plant. So I will have to get him out probably every other day or so and just kind of look him over to make sure I don't see any kind of scale spreading around or any other kind of pest or infestation. And then of course, if you do accidentally put a whole bunch of nicks and holes in your plant and you're worried about creating an opening for infestation or pest or disease to enter your plant, always use 100% cinnamon. Now you can use bonsai paste to kind of actually put over the plant and seal up the holes. But if you don't have the monetary means or a place to find bonsai paste and you don't want to pay for shipping or anything like that, you can get 100% cinnamon from your grocery store and sprinkle it over top of any of the cuts. As we know, cinnamon is a natural antibiotic and will prevent any kind of pest or disease from settling into your plant and having a field day that way. Well guys, that's really all I wanted to say about this plant. Like I said, for the next couple of weeks, I will have to have him out and look him over. It does pay to use a very bright kind of flashlight or cell phone light to kind of look over the leaves and over the stems, over the top of the soil, over every branch and petiole, and over top and under every leaf to make sure you don't see any kind of pest actually setting up shop in there and having a field day with your plant. Now I will go ahead and post a update video on this guy to let you know how the progress is going and to see if I'm actually able to kind of combat this infestation and see what he'll look like further on down the road, probably around midsummer. So be sure to check in for that update video on this guy to see if he'll actually make it and see if I don't actually lose my mind and get rather upset about this video. But I think I may have caught it rather early. I guess only time will tell. Go ahead and leave me a comment and let me know if you've ever had any kind of success or failures with the dwarf umbrella tree. Post me some pictures and let me see your bonsais because I like to see all this kind of work. Like I said, I'm going to have to do an update video in the future to see if this guy will actually make it and to see if I can actually combat this infestation and hopefully getting back on the right track. And while you're at it, go ahead and hit the subscribe button or the bell next to it. That way you'll know anytime that I've uploaded a new video. If you know anybody that has any kind of bonsais or a dwarf umbrella tree, feel free to share my video. That always helps me out tremendously. Until next time guys, take it easy and don't forget, always plant prudently. Thank you YouTube.